Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we are unpacking something truly chilling. We're looking at a piece of rural Ohio lore that absolutely refuses to stay buried. We're exploring the legend of the train under Hollow Creek. Now, usually, when we analyze these local legends, we eventually find a neat, logical explanation right at the center of it all. But the source material we're diving into today, it completely defies that logic. It's a story about a station that officially closed way back in 1971, a track that literally hasn't seen a schedule in over 50 years, and yet a train that somehow never stopped running. So grab a seat and get comfortable, because this is going to get incredibly dark. And trust me, the ending of this story will stick with you for a very long time. Last boarding call. It's just a whisper, right? But what is so absolutely terrifying here is the context. You see, this wasn't recorded in the 1950s on some old vintage equipment. This was captured on tape in 2008 by a group of local teenagers who were out filming in the woods near Hollow Creek, right where the tracks don't even exist anymore. They were literally filming this old black locomotive moving completely silently through the trees, and right before their footage cuts out, their microphone picks up this impossible, raspy whisper. It's concrete proof that whatever is happening out at Hollow Creek, it definitely didn't end when the railroad company abandoned the line. Something is still riding those non-existent tracks.
Section 1. The Legend of Hollow Creek. A grounded man meets a ghost story.
Okay, to really understand this timeline, we've got to look at our primary source here, a man named Earl Donovan. Now, Earl wasn't some internet ghost hunter out looking for clicks, not at all. He was a 70-year-old Vietnam veteran, a former steelworker, and a widower from Dayton, Ohio. He was about as grounded and practical as they come. For decades, he flat out refused to talk about what happened to him. But in 2024, just shortly before he passed away, he finally broke his silence in a late-night radio interview. He gave us what is basically the definitive account of the Hollow Creek train. And his central thesis? It's horrifying. He claims the train isn't carrying passengers, it's collecting them. Grounding this myth in reality is exactly what makes Earl's story so much more disturbing. Look at this timeline. In 1962, a massive personal tragedy strikes Earl when his younger brother drowns. Keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to why that is absolutely critical later. In 1971, Hollow Creek Station is officially abandoned. Then we hit October 1979, the night of Earl's fateful encounter. Decades pass with all these strange reports and missing persons piling up, eventually leading to that 2008 teenage footage we just talked about. And finally, in 2024, Earl gives his final interview. What we're looking at is a persistent, decades-long pattern of anomalies surrounding this one abandoned stretch of Ohio dirt.
Section 2. The Stop During the Storm, when the rain went silent.
Let's really try to put ourselves in Earl's shoes for a second. Imagine it's a Thursday night in October 1979. He's 25 years old, driving home from Toledo, and the rain is so incredibly heavy it's just blurring the highway. At exactly 12:40 a.m., right as he's nearing Hollow Creek, his truck engine just completely dies. There's no smoke, no sputtering whatsoever. It's just running 1 second and dead the next. But the true, deep terror of this story begins the moment Earl steps out of the truck into that freezing rain, because he realizes the storm has gone completely silent. Dead quiet. There's no thunder, no wind, not even the sound of insects. Just the sound of a distant train whistle echoing through this heavy, dead air. Peering through the rain, Earl spots the half-rotten Hollow Creek station. But impossibly, there's a light on inside. He walks in and finds this elderly ticket clerk in a vintage uniform who just looks at him, smiles politely, and whispers, "You're late." Then, the clerk slides a piece of stiff black paper across the counter. It doesn't have a destination on it. There's just one single word printed in the center, "Return." And right as Earl reads that word, the whistle sounds again, and this time, it's much, much closer.
Section 3. Ticket into the unknown. Boarding the black locomotive. So out of the pitch black of the storm, this train arrives. And the details Earl provided in his interview are just staggering. He described a massive black locomotive with no company name, no headlights at all, and absolutely no visible engineer in the cab. Thick steam is just rolling across the wooden platform like heavy fog. The clerk looks over at Earl and whispers this eerie warning: "You should board before they notice you." It's your classic fight or flight moment, right? But driven by some sort of unnatural, overwhelming compulsion, Earl steps aboard. The second he does, his senses are just assaulted by this overpowering smell of wet earth and burned coal. Inside the carriage, these old dim lanterns are flickering over rows and rows of totally silent passengers. He sees men in vintage military uniforms, women in clothes from past decades, little children just staring out from the dark corners, and the creepiest part, none of them are blinking, not a single one. As the train inexplicably lurches into motion, showing only this void of endless darkness out the windows instead of the Ohio landscape, a pale woman sitting directly across the aisle slowly turns her head to look at Earl. Water is constantly dripping from her hair, just puddling onto the floorboards. She looks him dead in the eye and asks, "First time?"
Earl, naturally absolutely terrified at this point, manages to ask her where exactly the train is going. The dripping woman just smiles this faint, terrible smile and replies with one single word: back. Suddenly, the carriage lights flicker completely out, and in that one split second of darkness, the illusion drops. The spell is broken. Earl sees every single passenger for what they truly are. Their skin is this sickly ash gray. Their eyes are sunken incredibly deep into their skulls, and their mouths are stretched open unnaturally wide. They aren't just ghosts, they are something deeply, profoundly wrong.
Section 4. Passengers from the Past. The Dining Car of Memories.
Well, when the lights return to their normal dim flicker, Earl doesn't stick around to ask any more questions. He scrambles up and flees deeper into the train. But here's where the environment itself turns hostile. As he moves from carriage to carriage, the train seems to be aging rapidly. The walls become slick and wet. They actually start to look like they are physically breathing. It's as if this entire locomotive is one massive living organism. And then, from somewhere up ahead in the gloom, he hears the unmistakable sound of someone crying. He follows that sound, pushing his way into the dining car. Now, remember that timeline we talked about earlier? In the corner of the dining car, Earl finds a little boy sitting all alone by a cracked window, looking absolutely terrified. Earl carefully approaches and asks the boy his name. The boy looks up and quietly answers, "Daniel. Daniel Donovan." It is Earl's younger brother. He is still 8 years old, and he is still wearing the exact same blue jacket he had on the very day he drowned back in 1962.
The horrifying truth was suddenly undeniable. The train somehow knew. It knew that Earl had spent his entire life blaming himself for Daniel's drowning. It wasn't just aimlessly transporting lost spirits. It was actively weaponizing Earl's survivor's guilt against him. And the exact moment Earl comes to this realization, the lights fail entirely. Complete, suffocating darkness swallows the dining car. Then, the dead silence is broken by whispers, just hundreds and hundreds of whispers filling the dark space around him, murmuring names, muttering regrets, reliving dark, painful memories. The text from our source material makes this chillingly clear. The train feeds on human regret.
Section 5. The Engine of Human Guilt. The conductor appears.
Panicking, Earl stumbles blindly into the next car. As he does, the passengers around him slowly start standing up in the dark. They're all just watching him, and they're all wearing that same wide smile. That is when the conductor finally decides to show himself. He is impossibly tall, incredibly thin, and he's wearing a black uniform that is completely soaked through with rainwater. His face is entirely hidden in the shadow beneath his hat, but his smile is perfectly visible, and it's way too wide and entirely too still. Earl backs away slowly, pleading, asking what this place is. The conductor just tilts his head at an awful angle and says, "A station between guilt and memory." Then, absolute chaos erupts. The train whistle screams this deafening metallic shriek. Every single dead passenger in the car simultaneously snaps their head toward Earl. The smiling conductor slowly raises one pale hand and whispers, "Tickets, please." At that exact moment, dozens of cold gray hands emerge from the darkness, reaching out to grab him. Earl turns and absolutely sprints for his life.
This whole escape sequence, it is pure nightmare fuel. Step 1, he has to run a gauntlet through the passenger cars, where the hallways seem to stretch out impossibly long, like a bad dream. Step 2, as he's fleeing, he sees the compartment doors flying open, but they aren't showing the inside of a train. They're showing different decades, impossible landscapes. He sees muddy battlefields, rain-soaked funerals, flooded-out towns. It's a visual representation of every single lost thing these passengers ever regretted. Step 3, he finally bursts through the heavy metal doors into the engine room. And this is the most terrifying revelation of the entire explainer. He looks desperately into the roaring furnace to see what powers this monstrous living train. And guys, it isn't coal, it isn't steam, it is human faces. Thousands of faces are pressed tightly into the glowing furnace walls, their mouths wide open, screaming silently through the roaring flames.
Section 6. The Unexpected Finale. The Lingering Truth. The conductor is right behind him now. He leans in and whispers this horrifying, undeniable truth. You boarded willingly. Earl looks back at the furnace, sees those thousands of trapped people writhing in the fire, and suddenly notices the emergency brake lever. Without even hesitating, he reaches up and pulls it with everything he has. The entire train screams. And I don't mean a metallic screech of brakes, I mean a real collective human scream. The locomotive shakes violently, derailing off the tracks. The passengers instantly collapse into piles of black ash. The windows shatter inward, and in the blink of an eye, Earl is suddenly standing right back in the freezing rain at the abandoned Hollow Creek station, just completely alone. So what happens next? Well, the local police find Earl wandering the highway at sunrise, totally in shock. Of course, nobody believes his wild story, but the data tells a very different tale. Over the following decades, missing persons cases inexplicably spiked near that old station. Locals constantly report seeing weird lights hovering over abandoned tracks, or hearing phantom train whistles during heavy storms. And all of this slowly builds up, culminating in that 2008 teenager footage we discussed at the very start. The phenomenon never stopped. Earl himself never went near railroad tracks again for the rest of his life, but he did admit that sometimes, late at night, he could still hear whistles blowing just outside his bedroom window.
Which brings us to the dramatic, unexpected end of Earl's 2024 interview. The radio host leans in and asks Earl one final, incredibly heavy question. He asks, "Earl, do you think the train was hell?" Earl stays completely silent for a long, long time, just letting the weight of that question hang in the air. And then, very quietly, leaning into the microphone, he answers, "No." I want you to really think about the absolute horror of that answer. If a living, breathing train fueled by the burning faces of screaming souls designed specifically to weaponize your deepest guilt and trap you forever isn't hell, then what on earth is it? And honestly, more importantly, is it still out there tonight, rolling through the Ohio rain, just waiting patiently for its next willing passenger? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Let that thought keep you awake tonight, and I'll see you in the next Explainer.